Can start the official part. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be today. It is great to see so many participants joining live today. I see on my side 80 participants and counting. A warm welcome from Berlin, Germany. My name is Radina, and I'm an advisor here at the Technical Support Unit, or the TSU as we call it for short, which is the Secretariat of the Mitigation Action Facility. It is my pleasure to welcome you today, the second webinar for the Call for Projects 2023, during which we would like to take a closer look at the submission for project concepts via an open application platform. Before we dive into today's webinar, I would like to go over a few aspects with you, a few goals that we'd like to achieve. First, we will take a recap of a few points from the last webinar, the first webinar of the Call for Projects 2023, including what is the Mitigation Action Facility, as well as take a look at the project cycle. We will also go over how to submit a successful project concept and take a look at the open application platform. And lastly, we will answer your questions and point you to useful resources we have compiled and point you to where you can find these. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded on our website together with the PowerPoint and answers to all the questions we have raised today. Now, I would like to introduce you, as you already see on the slide, to the rest of the team that will be joining me in guiding you through the different sections of the webinar. These colleagues, as you see, are all here based in the TSU with me and are also in Berlin. On the left, you see Claudia, our knowledge management expert, Nina, our co-management lead and co-webinar for the second time, and Claudemir, our program assistant. And on the right, you see me. Before we dive into the topics of today's webinar, I would like to take a minute and ask you to respond to a short poll that my colleague Claudia will now launch. This will give us an insight into who is listening today. And the first question is, how did you hear about the webinar? And you may enter your response. We see some answers trickling in. Wow, okay, great. Maybe a couple more seconds. The second question we would like to hear from you is, what region are you representing? Europe, Latin America, Oceania, Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, or none of the above? The third question, what type of organization are you representing today? With several answers being available here: international organization, government ministry, private sector, academic institution, other. Next question is, to which sector are your project ideas linked to? Energy, transport, industry, or cross-sectoral? And do you intend to submit an application to the Call for Projects 2023? Yes or no? All right, I believe this was the last question that we had. Thank you very much for your inputs here and providing us some insights. Also, the results you could see yourself as well in terms of who we have present with us today. With this, then we can move on to the agenda for the webinar, which is as follows. The first section, Claudemir will say a few words about the technical setup. I will briefly introduce the Mitigation Action Facility and recap key aspects of the Call for Projects 2023. Nina and Claudia will then take the stage and introduce the project concept by looking at the template, discussing what makes a successful concept, cover the assessment criteria, and provide you with a sneak peek into the open application platform, the new tool we'll be using and launching, through which you can submit your project concepts and how this will work. Lastly, Claudia and Claudemir will cover several questions which we received in and since the last webinar as part of the FAQ session. And during the webinar itself, we will be collecting questions. So post your questions in the chat as we move along. And afterwards, Nina and I will answer a handful as part of today's webinar. And all questions that have been posted today, either covered or not, will then be answered and posted on our website by the end of May. And with that, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Claudemir, for some technical aspects.
Hello, everyone, also from my side. I'll show some technical aspects. This is really straightforward. So in the top right of your control panel, you see that your camera is off and you're automatically muted. This will be your status during the whole meeting. You can click on the chat button on the top half of your screen to submit your questions. So please always use the chat function for that. Also, another point is about subtitles. You can see 3 dots on the top of your screen, which will say more when you click on them. You can then click on the language and speech, and then further click on turn on live captions. This will give you live subtitles or captions during the webinar. You can also click on the right for the 3 dots and then click on the change caption language, and then you can select the language in that you want to see these subtitles in. And please do remember that you cannot unmute yourself. Then please use the chat to post your questions. That's all. Thank you. And back to you, Radina.
Thanks, Vladimir. I hope this was clear to everyone. And with that, then we can move on to the next section, which is the Mitigation Action Facility and who we are. Next slide, thank you. We're faced with a big challenge. To keep 1.5 degrees goal and reach, global emissions need to be halved by 2030. And to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, at least $4.3 trillion is needed annually by 2030, whereas only 16% of this needed climate finance is actually being provided. Only by speeding and scaling up the implementation of NDCs, nationally determined contributions, could this 1.5 degrees Celsius stay within reach. It is the mission of the Mitigation Action Facility to accelerate and drive sectoral decarbonization by funding transformational climate mitigation projects in partner countries in key priority sectors. As an agile, high-impact and country-driven fund, the Mitigation Action Facility supports scalable, replicable, sector-wide solutions, including pilots that enable officially development assistance eligible partner countries to meet their climate goals. And next slide. The donors of the Mitigation Action Facility, so multi-donor fund, stem from contributions from Germany, the UK, Denmark, EU, and the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, the CIF. The Mitigation Action Facility was first created in 2012 under the banner of the NAMO facility. And at COP27 in Egypt this past November, while celebrating the 10th anniversary of the facility, the board announced a name change to the Mitigation Action Facility effective as this year. And together with this rebranding, restated its commitment to fund ambitious climate change mitigation projects, to implement NDCs and long-term strategies that are central to meeting the Paris Agreement goals while shifting towards accelerating decarbonization in priority sectors. And we'll be touching upon this again and again as part of this call for projects 2023. So far, the donors have committed about 668 million euros. And for those who are just joining us for the first time, the Mitigation Action Facility operates an annual calls for projects. The calls are competitive and only the best projects are selected. And as part of today's webinar, we'll give you an overview as how you can participate in this upcoming call while highlighting new features such as the simplified application process and how we'll be assessing your submission and walking you through new features such as the open application platform. Our portfolio at this time has 47 projects, previous slide please, in 33 countries. As you can see on the map on the left, there are some countries that have 2 or 3 projects even, but we invite you to take a look at our website for more details on these projects. As you can see, we have projects from from across the globe, as we do not have specific region focus, while with the call for projects under the Mitigation Action Facility, there are priority sectors, transport, energy, industry, and I will be touching upon this on the next slide. As I mentioned, at COP27, the Mitigation Action Facility announced its new call for projects 2023 with up to 100 million euros to accelerate decarbonization in priority sectors, namely energy, transport, and industry. And this is because the Mitigation Action Facility strives to follow the logic of the IPCC Common Reporting Framework, as well as incorporate recommendations as outlined in the Breakthrough Agenda Report 2022. And that is highlighted in the 6th report of the IPCC, energy, transport, and industry cumulatively accounted for more than 67% of the global annual greenhouse gas emissions. Here on the right, you can find more information in terms of what could be considered under these sectors, as well. You can read more about this on our FAQ section of the website of this call. Here, I'd also like to stress that cross-sectoral projects linked to those priority sectors are also supported, and Nina will be providing some practical examples later on. So what makes funding from the Mitigation Action Facility attractive, and why is it worth, and why is applying for funding? Here we would like to highlight a few aspects to you. All funding provided is grant-based. It is open to all ODA eligible countries, and no accreditation is required for applicants. Support is provided for the implementation of national climate plans and strategies, and there's extensive support and advice at all phases of project cycle, including the provision of funding to support for the detailed proposal development. For projects, there's up to 25 million euros available for a combination of technical assistance and financial cooperation to support ambitious mitigation projects. And the Mitigation Action Facility organizes regular exchanges on cross-cutting topics such as financial mechanisms, monitoring, gender between projects. So yeah, I would like to stop here, and we can now move on to the next section and take a closer look at the project cycle and the call for projects 2023. As I mentioned before, the donors announced at COP27 that up to 100 million are available for the call for projects 2023 to support what I mentioned, ambitious projects that combine technical assistance and financial mechanisms. Here's a recap from last webinar, and it's also described in the general information document of what the projects that we look for have in common. What are the characteristics? First, projects should be implemented in one of the 3 priority sectors, as I described, namely energy, transport, industry, or propose a cross-sectoral approach with a clear link to one of the priority sectors. And here again, Nina will provide some practical examples later on. Second, projects are country-driven and embedded in national development strategies and plans. Third, if there is an NDC partnership plan, the project should be aligned with the partnership plan, or at least within the NDC activities in the country. So certain engagement with NDC country facilitators would be required. While this is not expected to be formalized or institutionalized within the project concept, but at some point there will be a question from the Mitigation Action Facility on the alignment and synergies with the NDC partnership. Fourth, project, as I've mentioned a few times already, projects combine technical assistance, which is policies, regulations, capacity development, and financial cooperation. And fifth, those are used to leverage additional public and or private capital investments. Sixth, funds provided by the Mitigation Action Facility and associated investments must qualify for ODA throughout the entire implementation period of the project. Seventh, projects are implementation ready, which means that they can be implemented, including the plan, scope, and scale after a short phase of detailed preparation. And last but not least, projects apply an intersectional understanding of gender and social inclusion, just acknowledging in social inclusion, acknowledging gender and social inequalities. To overcome the prevailing inequalities, projects are to adopt a gender-responsive approach through concrete measures and activities, and I will be elaborating a bit more on that in a second, in a different slide. Maybe just the last point from the previous slide. There's reference to the eligibility and selection criteria on the slide, and you can see that in the GID. But Claudia and Nina will specifically will also be touching upon this shortly as well. So now we're currently looking at the project concept phase. So let's focus on that. This is an additional application phase for those who have known the facility for some time. And the aim of introducing this is to simplify the process and reduce the entry barrier by slimming down the information required at this stage and using a simplified online tool, which we'll be covering in a second. And with this, the project concept will become more accessible in terms of eligibility requirements for the applicants, and it will provide a possibility to address some eligibility-related shortcomings during the outline phase if the project concept is selected. So all in all, we're looking for a wider range of potential applicants and partners. And of course, we want to receive new ideas. We want to receive more ideas to drive ambitious climate action and accelerate decarbonization. On the next slide, you will see a visual representation of the project cycle of the Mitigation Action Facility and see where the project concept phase is located. So basically, starting with the call launch, step 3 is so step 3 is development of concepts, and this is what you have to do directly after the official opening of the call. And I will cover these dates with you on the next slide. Here it's important to remember that this project concept phase is mandatory, and we're offering this webinar and on our website useful information to guide you as you look, as you start working and continue working on your project concept. Two aspects that I would like to also highlight here is that after the concept phase, up to 25 project concepts will be selected to enter the outline phase. and invited to submit project outlines supplemented by annexes. A limited number of promising project concepts, so a limited number out of the 25 selected that have limited previous experience with the mitigation action facility or its predecessor will be able to receive tailored support into outline development. But for now, it's important to focus on the project concept phase, as this will enable your potential participation in the next steps of the assessment and the selection within the call for projects 2023. So, as I mentioned, here is a list of the key deadlines that you should be aware of. The call will be launched, as I said, on the 2nd of June during our event at the Global NDC Conference. We will publish the link to the open application platform on our website, and it will be open between 2nd of June and 31st of July. This means that you can already start developing your ideas now, but the actual submission and working with the platform itself will be open starting June 2nd up until July 31st. Afterwards, the assessment and selection of project concepts will take place. These dates are tentative, but we assume it will take place between August and September of this year. And then the selected project concepts will be invited to submit project outlines in October. And the outline phase will then last from October until the end of the year. One aspect that I would like to draw your attention to that was not covered in the last webinar is that the number of project concepts to be submitted per applicant is limited to 10 project concepts. So that means that all regional structures, subsidiaries of an individual applicant, for example, an international NGO or bilateral development agencies, are counted as one and the same applicant, and the limit is 10 per applicant. The cap is time-based, meaning that only the first 10 projects concepts received from this applicant by the time of submission will be considered. So here, coordination between the regional and the global structures will be required to set priorities and pre-select the most promising concepts. As I mentioned earlier, one of the characteristics that we look for in projects is the application of intersectional understanding of gender and social inclusion, which is an important aspect for the facility as a whole, as well as for the projects that we support. In September 22, the Mitigation Action Facility introduced a gender vision with the objective to advance gender equality and social inclusion in climate action beyond. Gender equality and social inclusion considerations should be mainstreamed into the entire project cycle to ensure that gender co-benefits are obtained. As such, the Mitigation Actions Facility's approach goes beyond the acknowledgement of gender and social inequalities, but aims at responding to the identified inequalities through concrete measures and activities to be realized during the project implementation. Here on this slide, you can find a link to the gender vision located on our website. And also here, in terms of projects and expectations, is that projects do not only acknowledge problems of gender discrimination or social exclusion, but are asked to address them through concrete activities and measures. And the level of detail progresses from submission of project concept up until the submission of a project proposal upon selection. And here, looking at project concept, where we are now, the bare minimum would entail the identification of opportunities to promote gender equality and social inclusion. And with this, this concludes my part, and I am pleased to now hand over the word to Nina, who will take a deeper dive into the concept phase.
Yeah, thank you very much, Radina. I'm happy to see that also questions are trickling in the chat. So we will provide responses a bit later at the end of the webinar, and I hope that some questions will already be addressed during my presentation as well. And of course, thank you very much to participants from my side as well. And let's move on and dive in directly into the question of project concept. And of course, there was a question already in the chat whether the project concept template is available. So our hope would be that you would know the response already, because we made the project concept template available quite some time ago, based also already on results and requests from the first webinar. So you're welcome to go to the current page, web page on the website of the Mitigation Action Facility. There you will find a link to an example of the project concept, and will see yourself what are the questions. And we estimate that when all those responses to all those questions are provided, the entire document will have around 6 to 7 pages in length. But I will also guide you now through the different sections of the project concept template for you to, again, better understand what the expectations are. First of all, when you open the template, again, as a disclaimer, you will not use this template to submit your project concept, but you will use a web-based application tool. But the web-based application tool will be structured in the same manner as the templates that we made available on our website currently. My colleague Claudia will talk a bit more about this application tools that we are developing, and that will be available and will be accessible for the submission of project concepts starting 2nd of June. So when you will be preparing and submitting your project concept, the first section that is required, it's general information. So all fields, of course, are mandatory to be filled out, but it's a rather formal section when you need to name your partner national ministries, which is quite often a ministry responsible for environment and climate change issues, UNFCCC negotiations, also line ministry responsible for the sectors that your project is intervening in. For example, subsection 1.5, you will need to provide information on your organization as an applicant, if of course you serve as an applicant. Main project partners would then include financial institutions, commercial companies, NGOs that would support the potential project implementations you can already now foresee would be instrumental for the success of your project. Again, understanding the dynamic situation that this is only a project concept phase, we are quite flexible in terms of the requirements that are presented at this stage. So you would be required to put at least one main project partner in this section, and at maximum 5 if you already can name so many. In overall, there will be 6 subsections in this section of the project concept template, and majority of the sections, or all of them, are rather self-explanatory. You'll need to indicate the funding volumes that you're requesting, the duration of the implementation of the project, and describe it in one sentence. What would require more information is, of course, sections 2 and section 3 of the project concept template. In section 2, which is called project rationale, and I hope that we will see it soon on the screen as well. So section 2, called project concept, it has subsections 2.1, 2.7, and what is important to explain here is, of course, kind of background of the project rationale, but the name of the section is project concept. You will need to describe the starting situation, do barrier analysis, then describe what is behind the project, what is the project idea, describe proposed technology, financial mechanism, business model, embedding into the national policies and sector, and envisioned technical assistance measures. What is important in order to be successful when filling in this section 2, we would ask you to respond in as much detail as possible to the guiding questions that you will see either you see currently in the template, or you will also see them in the open application platform. So all those guiding questions will be there. You will be able to provide responses to them step by step. In the template currently, you also see that there will be word limits. It is indeed so. So when you will transfer your information into the open application platform, there won't be word counting, but there will be characters counting, but we will make sure that words translated into characters in a non-discriminatory manner, so you will not be disadvantaged when you copy-paste your information. But just to keep in mind that there will be limitations, and considering that the platform is web-based, there will be a very strict control. If you have more characters that are allowed, then you will need to shorten your text, basically. So again, keep in mind already the indicative word count that is provided in the template in PDF that is available on our website. What is important when you start describing your project concept is, of course, barrier analysis. So good barrier analysis is key for developing a robust project concept, and will be then essential and important when you move forward towards project outline and project proposal phases. What is also important in this case is that in addition to technical side, technology, financial mechanism, number of units that will be installed, of course, we would like to understand and see the scope, if possible, geographic scope of the project already at the project concept phase. But what is also important is to consider soft elements, not to forget about the target group. As Radina's mentioned before, consider the topics of gender equality and social inclusion, pay attention to behavioral issues, so not to neglect barriers in the area of social customs or certain attitudes and behavioral barriers. So all those aspects need to be considered if you want to develop a good project concept and move on. There is a question on financial mechanism also as part of the section on a project concept. So in order to justify the proposed financial mechanism, it is rather logical that you would need some background calculations. You don't need to present them because, again, what we require at this stage is only one document, which is project concept. But in order for you to better justify the selected financial mechanism and also to better present a narrative on the business model, you would need certain calculations in order, again, to design a good, feasible, viable intervention. And of course, one of the questions you will see in the project concept template asks about the ongoing initiatives, projects, programs in the sector, in the country. So we would like it to also pay attention actually to this question, to analyze what is going on, to understand very well what are the ongoing initiatives, projects, programs, what type of barriers they are targeting, and whether there are possible overlaps, which is not that good in our case, and where there are possible synergies. So some of the barriers are already targeted and addressed by some projects, so you can build upon that and facilitate further the deployment or the dissemination of the mitigation technology or mitigation practice that your project is targeting. And now with the section 3, which is about project ambition, it's a shorter one. There are only 3 questions there. The most wordy is the description, the narrative on the potential for transformational change. But again, this section also is quite self-explanatory, considering a lot of guiding questions that we provide to you. So if you respond to those questions, if you reflect on them, you are likely to come up with a narrative on how the project is can potentially trigger the transformational change. But also our questions kind of reverse design. Our questions should inspire you to think critically whether the projects really can trigger transformational change, whether those measures that you're offering can trigger the transformational change that the mitigation action facility is looking for. Then you will be asked about the financial ambition of the project and mitigation potential. In order to estimate your financial ambition, we understand that it can be difficult at this stage. Nevertheless, it is possible. because you will know the volume of funds that are foreseen for the financial mechanism that you are asking for as part of the project for the financial mechanism. And you will also know, because you will be describing it in the section 2, what type of financial instruments you will be employing and their respective potential for mobilizing finance. So in this case, it is possible to estimate the potential financial ambition, because you would know how guarantees work, that the guarantees accumulate or mobilize additional equity, additional loans from private banks. If you offer a concessional loan line, it may also mobilize contributions in the form of collateral, additional equity contributions, and probably additional loans from other participating banks. And even subsidies, if it is a partial subsidy, can also mobilize additional financing in a form of co-financing to the subsidies that you are providing, co-investment to the subsidies that you are providing. So again, it will be a tentative, but we would encourage you to think about that and to indicate what are the potential leverage of the project potential, its financial ambition. And next, you will also be required to estimate the mitigation potential. There was a good question in the chat already, whether any guidance will be available, whether it is available now. Now there is no guidance on the website of the mitigation facility that would be applicable to the project concept phase, but we are working on it, and it will become available in the coming week, latest by the beginning of June. So we would just encourage you to check our website regularly, but it will also be part of the newsletter. We are working on the mitigation guidelines that will be tailored specifically to the project concept phase, that will explain how you estimate your potential greenhouse gas emission reductions based also on the sector, on the priority sectors that your project is implemented in or is planned to be implemented in. And of course, it will be a simplified calculation methodology, but at the same time, it will be consistent with what is required at the project outline and further on project proposal stage, so that the applicants can gradually, if they're selected for further steps of the project cycle, so that they can gradually build upon the calculations for project concept phase if they are moving forward. I finish here with regard to the successful concept submission. I hope that it is clear, and again, would encourage you to go to the website to see the form yourself. You can start working on that already. Just keep in mind that you will enter the information in the web-based application platform, and the application platform will be available from the 2nd of June. Moving on, I will touch a bit upon, it's also a certain recap on the concept assessment and eligibility check. My colleague Claudia will remind you what are the eligibility requirements to project concepts. I will remind you what are the assessment criteria, and particularly link it to the specific sections in the project concept template. So in the concept assessment, you know it already. You also can look up this information in GID. There are 2 criteria, ambition and feasibility. Ambition has 3 sub-criteria, which is potential for transformational change, financial ambition, and mitigation potential. And it's quite self-explanatory that majority of the information from the section 3 of your project concept template will fit into the section or into the criterion of ambition when the assessment will be done. And we can move on to the next slide already. So, and when feasibility is ranked, there are 2 sub-criteria. It's project rationale and project design. And again, naturally, logically, it will be mainly assessed based on the information provided by you in section 2, project concept. So this is just in a nutshell for you to understand how information will be then linked to the specific sub-criteria in the assessment process. What in general we are looking for is, it was mentioned already, it's of course mitigation potential, but there are different level of detail, of course, that is expected at different stages of the project cycle. At the project concept phase, we would await from you kind of tentative estimate, even a range of potential greenhouse gas emission reductions, but it should be rather conservative, considering that you will need to develop the methodology to build upon this methodology and to develop more comprehensive calculations if you are moving forward. Financial mechanism as the same. We want to see certain idea about the financial mechanism that you want to employ, but then if you are moving to the next stages, you will of course require to develop it further, to understand what kind of institutions you will need to work with, to have clear rationale, to have coherent phase-out concept, and so on and so forth. Technical and economic viability also is always a very important criteria and will be of course considered already now as a project concept phase. So we want to see very well justified technology. Why this mitigation technology is supposed to be the most effective in the country and sector context that you are proposing to us, why other mitigation technologies would not work as effectively as the one that you are proposing. And as I said before, barrier analysis is a key aspect when you start developing a project. You need to understand very well what are the barriers, including the structural ones. So not only the very surface related barriers, such as lack of liquidity in the sector, for example, but you also need to understand what are the structural barriers, what are the fiscal regulatory barriers, what are the behavioral barriers, everything that prevents the sector or subsector from transformation. But again, we would encourage you to start with good barrier analysis already now at the project concept stage, and then build upon that as you move forward, if you move forward to the project outline and then project proposal phases. Now a few more slides on a few questions that we have been receiving constantly, considering that there is a new focus of the mitigation action facility on priority sectors. So first of all, I would like to touch upon cross-sectoral projects, and we already had a question in the chat with regard to agricultural sector. Agriculture is a non-priority sector. So we have 3 priority sectors that are defined by the mitigation action facility. It's energy, industry, and transport. All other sectors are considered to be non-priority sectors, and would be, if they are linked to one of the priority sectors, they are eligible to apply to calls of the mitigation action facility, and they will be considered a cross-sectoral project. So what is cross-sectoral project? It's either a combination of 2 priority sectors or a combination of priority sector with a non-priority sector. As I said before, examples of non-priority sectors include wastewater treatment, agriculture, forestry, other land use, FOLO, urban planning, so on and so forth. Linked to one of the priority sector, in this case, if you are targeting non-priority sector, is mandatory. What is an example? We have an example of biomass to energy on our website. So again, it's, for example, production of energy blocks or pellets from forest residues or invasive species. It's urban planning with focus on net zero public transport, for example, or it's energy generation from waste. But in this case, alignment with the 3Rs concept, reduce, reuse, recycle, is of course of key importance, because a rather non-sustainable waste burning project would not be desirable. Project targeting food processing, as well as agricultural projects focusing on the entire value chain, can be considered in the call, but again, they will be considered in the context as cross-sectoral projects, and they need to demonstrate a link to one of the priority sectors. It can be energy sector. In this case, the intervention should include an energy-related component, for example, renewable energy for self-supply, energy efficiency, and they also can be linked to the industrial sector, for example, through further optimization of resource use and industrial processes that would directly lead to emission reductions. In this case, what is also important to keep in mind for cross-sectoral projects, that intervention must be aligned and with and ideally prioritized in NDCs. So this might be a more problematic or more challenging issue for cross-sectoral project, but still keep that in mind, pay attention to that, because this alignment and prioritization in NDCs is essential. Next slide, I would like to explain a bit more on novel technologies, because again, it was partially a lot of questions that we were receiving from potential applicants. So there is piloting modality as potential possible modality to apply as part of this call. Piloting modality can only applicable to so-called novel technologies, innovative technologies. We have a few examples on our website, but a more generic description would be that an innovative technology that would suit for a piloting modality under the call for Project 2023. Those are technologies with the readiness level 5 and 6. Depending on the source where you look it up, TRL 5 is considered to be a small prototype, technology validated in a relevant environment, and TRL 6 is considered to be full prototype at scale, so it is a technology demonstrated in relevant environment. Both of those, if you target those technologies, and examples again include hydrogen or ammonia-fueled engines in shipping industry, improved ore refining methods in iron and steel, again, different TRLs depending on specific technologies that you would like to apply, high mitigation potential. In this case, you will be able to offer a piloting modality. Piloting modality would mean that for first few years of the project can be used to develop a to prove the concept, to demonstrate the technology, but then within the project duration of the maximum 5.5 years, you will also need to reach milestones and upscale the project. So if the demonstration of the concept is successful, if the technology can be upscaled, then the mitigation action facility would, of course, prefer to see the upscaling happening within the implementation duration of the project. But again, I'm going too far, probably already to implementation. We are still in the project concept phase. So without further complication, I just would encourage you to, if you're interested in novel technologies, you can take a look at ETP Clean Energy Technology Guide. It's a very comprehensive list of various technologies of various sectors as well. So you're welcome to check it and consider what is the TRL of the technologies that you have in mind. I will stop here and will give a word to my colleague Claudia, who will remind you about the few eligibility criteria on the project concept phase. And again, getting back to project concept, we want the process to be rather easy. We don't want to confuse you too much. So focus on it and be encouraged to apply. And we are really looking forward to receiving project concept from you. And now, Claudia, over to you.
Thank you, Nina. And hello to everyone also from my side. As said, we will now have a closer look at the eligibility criteria. To be able to receive funding under the Call for Projects 23, your project concept must meet the following criteria. The concept is submitted timely, and this means by 31st of July 2023, 3 p.m. Central European Summer Time. As mentioned earlier and explained to you by Nina, the project has to focus on one of the three priority sectors: energy, industry, or transport, or be a cross-sectoral project linked to one of the priority sectors. Please make sure that the information provided is complete and in English only. This means that mandatory fields in the web-based application tool are filled out. Please also make sure that the country is eligible for the development funding and that the funding volume for implementation is between 5 and 25 million euro. And last but not least, the implementation duration has to be between 3 and 5.5 years. If your project meets all those criteria, you can submit the project concept. For further information, we would invite you to have a look at the General Information Document, GID. And this leads us to the next slide. What is exactly the General Information Document about? This is the central source of information for the Call for Projects 2023. It aims at assisting the applicants in preparing and submitting the project concept, but it also helps afterwards in developing the outline and the proposal. Additionally, the General Information Document describes the project cycle that was introduced by you by Radina step by step. We also provide further information regarding the assessment process and assessment criteria through this document. And as you can see, currently the General Information Document is only available in English. You can find the link here on the slide. but it will be also translated into French and Spanish by mid-June. Please be noted that the PowerPoint presentation together with a recording of the webinar today will be published on our website afterwards, so you can access all those links afterwards. Let's move on to the open application platform that was mentioned today already quite often. This is the web-based application tool that we will use for managing the call for projects 2023. To submit a project concept, you need to use the open application platform accessible through the website of the Mitigation Action Facility. So no handing in of Word documents, PDFs per email or whatsoever. The platform will be accessible on the day of the launch of the call, and this is, as we've heard earlier, June 2nd. To eventually submit a project concepts, applicants have to first register at the platform. It will look more or less like this example here on the slide. A personal email address or an email address of an organization can be used. And to register, the applicant will have to enter his or her email address on the landing page of the platform and then agree to our privacy policy. The applicant will then receive an email with a confirmation link, and by clicking then on the link, the registration is completed. Afterwards, you will be able then to populate a project concept in the open application platform step by step with information. For sure, it is always possible to save a draft at any time and return and add it to the concept later. In order to facilitate the filling of the concept, there will be different types of inputs such as free text, radio buttons, date pickers, etc. As Nina already mentioned, please keep in mind that there is an indicative limit of characters per free text box. In addition, validation will be automatically performed on some fields to ensure coherence and correctness of the answers given by the applicants. For ease of use and documentation, an export of your project concept to Word or PDF is possible at any time before or after submission. And finally, a dashboard for applicants gives you the opportunity to view and manage various applications and to be kept informed about the status of these applications. We will share a screencast of the use of the open application at a later stage, and this will be uploaded then to the website and shared via our newsletter. I would then now move on to the next slide. Besides the general information document that I mentioned before, we would like to highlight a few other key resources that can help you with the submission process, like the recording of the first webinar, fact sheets on financial mechanisms and transformational change, or the gender vision of the Mitigation Action Facility, amongst others. You can find the links to these documents here on the slide, but you can also go directly to the website and check other available resources, as we have actually many publication and knowledge products that provide insights on those key topics. And with this, we would now come to the next section of our webinar today, which is focusing on frequently asked questions. We would directly jump, because we are actually running out of time, we would directly jump to question number 6, because we actually prepared additional questions, but due to the time, we would skip those questions. They've been anyway already covered by the FAQs that were shared before the call, so you can come back to these questions on the website, or you can find them on the slide. But FAQ 6 has not yet been published, so we will bring this here into the call today. So Claudia, please tell us, I will read out the question, you can then answer what, so will the call for project 2023 of the Mitigation Action Facility consider projects that integrate revenues from the sale of carbon credits with the grant funding provided by the facility?
Yes, thank you, Claudia. So at this time, the Mitigation Action Facility is in the process of refining its position on collaborating with carbon markets. So to better understand the level of interest from potential applicants in combining the facilities funding with carbon credits revenues, we are using the project concept phase as opportunity to explore the various approaches that are available. So please feel welcome to all projects ideas, including those that engage with carbon markets during the project concept phase. At this stage, applicants are invited to present their ideas without limitations, as the Mitigation Action Facility looks forward to seeing what innovative concepts may emerge.
Thank you, Claudemir. And with this, we can actually already move on, and I would hand over to you, Nina, for the Q&A section, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudia. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, so if the applicants will start leaving, we would understand that. I will just cover a few probably simplest questions, but I would also encourage applicants to look again into GID and FAQs, because a lot of questions that are asked, there are actually responses already provided on our website. There was a question whether it's mandatory to have co-funding from other public and private capital investment. So the response, it depends a bit what you mean by co-funding. For example, if you understand it as a matching grant, no, the matching grant is not required, but the project should demonstrate that they can leverage additional private and public financing with the funding provided. There is no minimum threshold for the private and public leverage, but it's still through the financial mechanisms that you are offering, you should be able to demonstrate how the mitigation technology or practice proposed in the project will be financed and showcase that the project will create favorable market conditions for further uptake and upscaling of the mitigation technology or practice. So in this case, it's kind of a mandatory prerequisite for the success of the intervention. And you need to show that the project is able to leverage some additional financing. There was also a question on the limitation in terms of the number of concepts, whether it concerns only the current call or future calls as well. So if I understand the question correctly, there will be no cumulative effect in terms of the 10 cap of 10 project concepts submitted during a few calls for projects. The cap is applied to the current call and only to the current call. So there will be, if the new call is announced in 2024, then all applicants will start basically from zero, let's say. So it won't accumulate. And I hope that this provides some clarity. There was also a few questions on if the call is open to multilateral development banks, international financial institutions, but also to governmental departments. And our main message is that the project concept phase is open to all applicants. You just need to develop your project concept and present it to us. If there are certain eligibility restrictions or a need in either additional documentation from the national government, such as an endorsement letter, or if there is a need in identifying an applicant support partner in case when the ministry has applied or ministerial department, in this case, the TSU will be able to support you upon the conditions that the project concept is strong enough and is invited to proceed to the project outline phase. So let's don't overthink. If you have a project concept, please apply. There was a question whether applicants are required to differentiate between direct and indirect emissions in the concept phase. Our approach here would be to rather focus on what we used to call in the project outlines direct emissions, because we would encourage you to be conservative and to estimate what are the real greenhouse gas emission reductions that are attributable to the units of technology installed with the support of the financial mechanism of your project concept. We assume that it will be a bit easier to estimate and won't be that speculative, because if you start to operate with so-called indirect emission reductions, which is emissions stemming from technical assistance, policy advice, fiscal interventions, and also replication of the project approach, it's probably too difficult to estimate it at the project concept phase. Very few questions again about non-priority sectors. As said before, if you consider your intervention to be linked to a non-priority sector, whether it's water, wastewater treatment, water supply, waste, agriculture, forestry, just ensure that there is a clear and robust link to the energy sector or industry or transport, and that this link is also substantiated by corresponding greenhouse gas emission reductions. In this case, this project would be considered as cross-sectoral. Last question probably that I will cover because we are overshooting, and I will give a word to Radina, who would have a few additional pieces of information. There was a question in the chat whether alignment with indices is mandatory. Yes, alignment with indices is mandatory. The sectors that you're intervening in or sectors should be mentioned in indices. They should be part of the indices. At the same time, there are no specific requirements with regard to submission of enhanced ambitious indices, submission of first updated indices or second indices to UNFCCC by a certain deadline. It was previously an eligibility criterion for 2 calls of the former NAMA facility, or Ambition Initiative call and Ambition Initiative round 2. It is not the case anymore. So just for you also to keep in mind, yes, alignment with indices is mandatory, but the submission of indices by a certain country to UNFCCC will not be an eligibility criterion, will not be considered as eligibility as part of the call for projects 2023. With that, Radina, over to you. And again, thank you all from my side for staying a bit longer with us.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Claudia and Claudemir as well. We just have a few last points we wanted to share with you before you leave, and it's great to see that so many people are still on the line here. As we've said, this webinar is recorded and will be uploaded on our website in the next few days. The presentation is already online and was already posted in the chat for your reference. The FAQs will be updated based on the questions we've been receiving also during this webinar in the course of the month. So do please take a look on our website. The co-launch, as we've discussed already a few times today, is on June 2nd. So stay tuned for further news on the website. And this is when the platform will also be launched. We are planning one additional webinar during the project concept phase, and that will be on the 19th of July. So mark your calendars, and we'll again be sending an email to all of our subscribers to the newsletter. And with this, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the newsletter, and you can find the link at the bottom of the slide on the left. As we've done in previous calls, there will be publication of clarification notes, as we've done in the past, in regular intervals. And here on the slide, you can see when do we publish and what is the deadline for the questions to be included in those notes, with the first one already approaching 4th of June. Again, we have a dedicated page for the call for projects. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact us. And the emails here on the left, contact@mitigationaction.org. And with that, please remember the deadline. I know we've said it a few times, but I would like to emphasize again, if you're interested in submitting a project concept to us, the deadline is July 31st, 3 p.m. Central European Summer Time via this open application web-based platform. And last point, before we close today, we would like to ask for your feedback on today's webinar by filling out this short survey, which my colleague Claudia will now post in the chat. Alternatively, you can also insert the listed URL also in your browser. And we would appreciate your feedback on the webinar today. So please take a moment to fill it out. And with that, on behalf of the team It is my pleasure. I would like to wrap up today's webinar and thank you again for your participation. And with that, I wish you a great day and see you next time. Bye.